care of everything else? I assume so. Started. So, hey everybody. So today is the 27th of July. So this is the SIG network sort of network policy plus subproject group, and I think this is our first actual recording that's going to get posted. I don't recall if we recorded the last meeting or not. We did. Okay, so it's our second official recording. So this will be on the internet. So everybody be nice to each other. Follow the CNCF guidelines. And we haven't had a lot of structure to this group thus far, other than going through these use cases. So to get us back to where we were at last time, we started talking a little bit about some of the service policy stuff. We also were talking a little bit about network policies specifically around the Kubernetes service endpoint and what we should do for those, because they may or may not be in a pod and whatnot. And I think our current kind of goal is to get as much feedback from new people as possible now that we have a much broader audience. And just to remind everybody, so far we've been using a grading system of green, yellow, and red. Red isn't necessarily bad. It's just something that we really have no idea how we can move forward. And green is something that people really want for sure. And it seems like there's probably a reasonable path forward. It's not a completely theoretical thing. And yellow is somewhere in the middle. It's something that some people might want, but we need to clarify exactly what they want and at least some intuition on how we might get there eventually to know that it's a practical goal. It looks like we have a new policy. So
now, by the way, that was a useful clarification of what's actually written on the page, because what's written on the page does not tell me that green and red are distinct. Something might be wanted, definitely wanted, but we don't know how to, it needs better definition, or is going to be hard to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. In general, it seems like that's been the way we've been using green, even though it's not the formal definition of it. So I'll just add it in there.
Hey, Jay, there were a couple folks still on the other link. They're jumping over right now.
Awesome. Okay, it's good to see you, Cody. So is anybody new here? It's Cody's first time to come since we've had the official subproject title. But is there anybody new here that wants to introduce themselves at all? I see a lot of, I think I see a few new faces.
Yeah, I'd gladly introduce myself.
Hey.
My name is Josh Harshman, and my company is recently really investing in Kubernetes, so I'm kind of getting more involved, or wanting to get more involved in some of these SIGs, especially around the networking stuff, because we got really bit in the butt about a month or two ago when some networking changes came down and all of our stuff stopped working. So that's my motivation for being here, and here to help out where I can.
Cool. Yeah, well, we're new, so we need people to help us for sure, right? This is something that that's kind of new, and so it's a new working group. And so feel free to reach out to me on Slack after this if you want to get caught up on things, so that you can help us move forward, sort of.
Yeah, absolutely.
With things. So just a quick for you and maybe for others that haven't been a part of this, that the whole deal is that, there's all these things that people wanted out of network policies, but this is really the first attempt to curate all of that into a single place. And initially it was total chaos because all these people had all these different ideas, but we're narrowing a funnel towards something that we think can be done tactically in the short term, and then other things that might be done in the long term, and then things that might never be done by the SIG, but that could be tools that some of us go off and collaborate on the side. So there's kind of three different funnels that things may flow into out of this working group. An example of the latter is, this idea we've been bouncing around about a policy CTL, right? A tool that could manage network policies for you statelessly as a client-side tool. Just something we might build that SIG Network doesn't need to necessarily help with. So there's a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, so what we do is we just, walk through the policies. So I guess maybe since we now have an agenda, maybe we should have a first item, which is PSAs, questions. We used to have this office hours section, so I think I'm just going to add that. Does anybody want to ask any questions before we look at some of the new user stories and then maybe kind of, go through some of the older ones?
Hi, my name is Gilman. Hi. I was just curious, just to sort of, help me understand things a little bit better. Kubernetes had its sort of place, and then, there's a lot of innovation happening in the mesh space as well, in open source. Trying to understand like how people are viewing this and from other perspectives when it comes to network policy redesign. Do you feel like there is some dovetailing there? Or do you feel like there is, necessarily some sort of a ramp from Kubernetes to service mesh? Like, how are people thinking about that? I'm just trying to organize my thoughts as we go.
Yeah, so that's a tough question, right? I mean, the whole thing with the service mesh like takes over your whole network, so there's a whole different set of security boundaries that you define there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
I think that's an ongoing question. Does anybody else? These were originally designed for developers, right? So these network policies. So it's something you use with an application. I don't, but we've threaded into this area of global policies very, very, very rapidly once we started collecting use cases. A lot of people wanted those.
Yes.
So it gets really muddy.
Okay.
It seems to me like the natural answer is that it's redundant at this point, but that's probably not a good answer. I don't know. Does anybody have a better answer than that?
I don't, but I think it's safe to assume that most of the people here are coming at it from like the CNI perspective.
Sorry, which perspective?
Like the perspective from like a CNI implementation.
Uh-huh.
I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are people here representing service meshes, but at least like the focus of this group, as far as I've seen, is mostly like at the container networking level.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to sort of like feel out the group and see like what does it mean to have that thing sort of hovering, somewhere up in the air. So appreciate you all sharing your perspectives. So yeah, didn't really need a binary answer one way or the other. Just wanted to understand how people are seeing it. Thanks.
We do have a policy.
That's a good question.
There is one policy in place that was proposed by one of your friends over at Google, saying about this very topic. Well, there is one thing which is, like Andrew mentioned, the CNI, like there, even with the CNI, like you may need to open certain things up in order for your mesh to work properly, right? So there's some synergistic value to that value.
In case he was about to say something.
Understood. Makes sense to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot to add, but like the way that I know that I've looked at this a little bit before is that there's some overlap, but they're not really necessarily exclusive with each other. Certainly, like we have a lot of Calico users that are using both network policy and service meshes, and Calico actually has an integration where we kind of blend the two and do some application layer enforcement of that network kind of access control that's provided through network policies. So I think there's some, I don't know, wiggle room and flexibility there for creativity.
Oh, for sure. No, I've definitely read the Calico posts on that, sort of dovetailing effect between the two. So I was just curious to know if there's like if we're evolving the network policy posture, is there a certain direction that we want to, stay true to kind of thing, and how do we want to keep service mesh in perspective or not? Was just curious to understand that.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Anybody else want to talk about anything else?
I do think it's really important that we keep our, like, I don't know what the right way to say it is, concepts clear. You know, like you kind of hinted at, Jay, network policy was originally a developer-focused API, and a lot of the way that it, the design and the way that it turned out in the end was influenced by that. You know, we expect this to be a developer-focused API that application developers are going to use, and not necessarily like a cluster admin or a security team is going to be using. And I'm keen that we keep that sort of focus while we're building these things out. Maybe it means we need additional APIs. Maybe we change the scope, but let's do that explicitly if we do.
Well, I mean,
can I build on that a little? I've been trying to do a little bit of synthesis because there's been, you know, this recurring issue of an app. I tend to go with the trichotomy of you know, there's app like Wilhelm will tell you, right? There's an app developer, there's an app deployer, and we've got cluster admins, right? And the app deployer is the one who, you know, really cares about what this app needs, and the cluster admin wants to be able to be in a position to say no. And I think you know, a lot of the reason we got into egress was really about being able to say no. You know, when we talk about app or developer focus, what we're really talking about is, you know, app deployer. And I think, you know, we have later in this, not on the top, but, you know, lower down on our list of use cases, you know, stuff about controlling egress and cluster admin concerns. So it occurs to me, yeah, you know, maybe we just went a little bit wrong with egress in treating it the same as ingress, because it's really somebody else's problem. You know, I think maybe a good synthesis would be to say, you know, the app deployer gets to say what this app wants in terms of egress, but something else gets to say what this app is allowed in terms of egress. And so maybe if we had a dichotomy such as there's an egress request and then the egress gets granted. We could even add this to the current system if we had RBAC had the ability, or we split the objects, but, you know, if one way or another, we could say, okay, an app can say what it will allow in, an app can say what it would request to go out, somebody else gets to approve and actually create the egress policy that allows it or not.
Well, why do you feel like egress is special compared to ingress in that regard?
I think it's the cluster admin is the one who really cares. So a lot of this is about reaching stuff outside the cluster. And it's really the cluster admin who's going to say, I want stuff in my cluster to be able to reach, you know, this and not that, right? Because often the cluster is running in some infrastructure that the cluster admin wants to protect, but he may or may not want to allow access to some stuff, right? Maybe he wants to allow free access to the internet. Maybe he wants to turn that off. Maybe he wants to allow access to certain internal stuff and not others internal stuff. You know, but it's the cluster admin who knows what kind of accesses from inside the cluster to out he wants to allow.
I mean, it seems like
when people talk about egress, they're almost always talking about, I want to block this, which is the opposite of ingress, where you're only talking, I want to allow this and block everything else. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything Mike just said. I think we did screw up with egress. The API we delivered is not what users actually wanted, and we need to step back.
But again, I think I do like the positive, you know, focus. I do think that's right. I think we should just try to do egress right in that way. So I do think, you know, that an app deployer or developer knows what the app would like to connect to outside, but it's somebody else who gets to say what I want to allow. They typically think about it in a negative way, right? Security is often focused in negative. I want to forbid this, I want to forbid that. But it could just as well be, and often is, right? If you look at firewalls, right? Their default deny, and then the firewall administrator says he wants to allow, right? We do the same thing here with the egress, right? The app has egress requests, and then the administrator will grant the egress requests that he wants to grant.
Okay. So I think it'd be really great if the very first thing we can agree on as a group here is whether we should expand the scope to include the cluster admin use cases. Sounds like we're all in agreement on that one.
I actually, you're all the experts on this. I'd love to hear opinions, but I'm like, it feels like this is sort of what the model that Mike described makes a lot of sense, where it's like, there's a sort of intention that, a developer may convey in the network policy, that they write today and say, I want egress to, I don't know, internet. Then there's, I don't know, cluster network policy that the platform admin writes and says, okay, app X is allowed to do internet, app X, app Y is not allowed to do internet. And then, whoever whitelists allow lists internet, then they can actually just, run against the cluster network policy and say, okay, it's denied or it's accepted. So it feels like it's in different realms. Instead of expanding scope of network policy, it could be two different objects because it's being targeted at two different personas. But of course, I'll happily take opinions from other people here.
If we want to do something that's noticeably different from current network policy, it's really hard to do it as network policy. Like, if we want to change the semantics much at all, we pretty much have to invent a new object.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily terrible.
Right. We could do this with new objects if only we could do something like, could we? I've been thinking about RBAC, for years. Right? I'd like to get RBAC a little more expressive. What if we got RBAC to say that, RBAC is about what objects certain subjects can actions that subjects can perform on objects. What if we can allow some additional distinction on the object, so that we can, for example, allow creation of network policies that specify ingress, but not creation of network policies that specify egress. Right? That would allow us to kind of additively, or without changing our objects, turn off the ability to grant of app deployers to grant themselves egress access. Then we introduce new objects by which they can request and be granted egress privilege.
So this whole decoupling thing I don't think we've ever introduced this concept before in any of these calls. I think it's a really powerful idea. We've had all this other stuff about specifically like being able to reason more about why things weren't happening. This would solve that problem also. Do we?
I'm not jumping to that conclusion. I think that's another harder problem.
Well, I mean, if I could, I could define all the. Yeah, I mean, I think it comes. Okay, it seems to me like that comes automatically because, or for some subset of use cases, you get that for free. But,
I think it's important for us, Jay, to again remember that this is an API abstraction that we're building here. Drawing an analogy to something like the Linux kernel or some other type of API surface area. We're not here to implement process. We're not here to implement or make it like look pretty necessarily in terms of visualization, any of that type of stuff. We just want to make sure that all the features that are necessary. I hear what Casey's saying about developer stuff. I don't know that I'm totally intent in limiting it to one persona. I think that there's going to be different tools that are going to use this API that may target different personas. I just want to ensure that whatever API we develop, it satisfies all the necessary use cases, whether that be blocking traffic or allowing traffic, from a developer perspective, and do it, with the most simple, semantics possible. And then if other tools need to build on that, fine. I want to be very careful that we don't, try to boil the ocean beyond just the simple API here.
So I think if I can summarize a little bit of what I've been hearing, we think that network policy went a little bit outside of its scope when it introduced egress support, because that is really more of a cluster admin or security focused concept, or the use cases for that. So we're talking now about ways to kind of rein that back in, so remove that capability from users of the network policy API who don't actually need that level of privilege. but also how to then provide that and other security focused use cases to the people who do need it.
I think that ship has sailed, and we should just accept the fact that network policies are for both developers and cluster admins, and then just try to like nail down the user stories that account for both.
And I don't think we need to get rid of the developer level egress necessarily, as long as there is admin level egress control that overrides it.
Yeah, +1.
I think the administrative egress control itself is an actionable use case that we could specifically write up to make some forward progress on this.
Yeah.
Is that
Okay,
like a way to codify this?
Yeah. By the way,
I
this
think
is
it's one of the.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, you go ahead.
I was just going to add another sentence to that. This is exactly why egress gateways come up all the time. This is where the administrator says, oh yeah, developers are doing egress, left, right, and center. I want all the traffic to go through this gateway, however that's deployed, whether it's a VM or pods or whatever. And then I can monitor all the traffic at the L3, L4, L7 layer, whatever. So it's exactly the need that we're talking about. This is where egress gateways also shine.
I thought one of the user stories already addressed or talked about administrative egress rules.
Oh, really?
So Jay, maybe we should just start going through the user
Yeah, my
stories.
remarks were an attempt to synthesize some issues that were kind of bubbling through several of the user stories.
We have this at a level of indirection.
Yeah, let's just. Yeah, Jay, let's just start from the top and just go through the user story.
Yeah, we had a new one at the top. Maybe we should start with the newest one.
Okay. Well, then is this?
Yeah, that was the newest one, right?
Yeah, this was the newest one, but but I figured you would want to actually write them down. Are you saying that you want to use this as the case that you proposed, or that you don't want to?
No, that's not exactly what I was proposing. But I thought we were kind of segueing to going through the user stories, but
okay,
I'm lost.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like we probably should write this down for the use case, so that we don't not have the use case. But
yeah, I'm trying to move from a collection of use cases to a synthesis, because we need to make that progress at some point.
Okay, so then we don't need to put this down as a use case. We can just say that's a possible implementation detail at some point. All right, cool. Well, if you want to add a note about that up here, it seems like that was something notable, but I'm not sure where we would put it down. So we can start it. Yeah.
One thing too, Jay, I know you want to get into some use cases and such, but one thing I think we should also do, and this may already exist, and so if it does, please make me aware.
Yeah.
To lessen the amount of time that we spend bike shedding on this call, I think we should come up with a set of principles that govern whether or not something should be added, as part of the API or part of the network policy API, right? Like, for example, as we think about personas, or as we think about, for example, we're talking about whether an admin should be able to block, right? Is that something that should be in policy, or is that something that should be handled by I just had a admission controller. Sorry, I had a brain freeze right there. So it should be handled by an admission controller, or should it be part of policy as a first class, citizen to the API? Those types of things. Like, I think we need to define the principles that we're going after here. Otherwise, we're going to get a bunch of use cases out there, but we won't know necessarily how to make them concrete into what we're trying to get to from an API perspective.
Yeah, I think actually the part of what you were saying that was kind of getting into implementation or solution details, right? I mean, whether something's an admission controller or not, that's a detail that I could argue with, but I think
that's true. That's true. What I'm trying to get at though is it something that is going for an API change rather, yes, admission controller could be implementation deal, but it also speaks directly to whether this is, part of the API surface, or are we trying to do something with the API that is not intended to be done?
I think right now we don't know. Like, I think what we're trying to do here is collect the user stories and use cases, and then categorize them in terms of what can we reasonably add to V1 and what should be like in a V2 with new resources and whatnot. So like I agree with everything you said, but I think we're just trying to understand the state of things first before we go there.
That's fair. That's fair.
And I think that we are gonna. I think we were going down that road, and then we have so many new people too, Cody, now that we're kind of being a little loose right now, so that everyone can kind of, get, sort of get acclimated, and I think we're gonna, get back to where we were, because before we became official, or we really were getting close to narrowing down a very clear set of sort of norms that we tried to adhere to, but we're kind of open the funnel back up. But in the next couple of weeks, let's try to do that for sure, right? Like maybe next week, remind us of that that again, because we need to get to that set of principles to be efficient.
Or maybe like an action item for Cody might be to take the current user stories and like in a separate doc write those principles down, and then maybe in the next meeting we could agree or disagree on those.
Yeah,
I'll take that, Andrew. That's good idea.
One other PSA or idea or whatever that I wanted to share that I haven't had time to think about between some crazy work stuff and then KubeCon and everything else, but I wanted to do this week or next week, was like make some concrete scenarios up so that we could actually speak to something concrete and kind of maybe go so far as to actually make that a bar for the use cases we go forward with. Like, actually define like a use case in terms of an actual, I've got my SQL running, I've got an IRC server running, I don't care what it is, but there's an actual application that people can think about and touch and feel and say, oh yeah, I see this use case, right? But the hard part about that is I don't know whether that should be defined like pictorially or through like, a set of shell scripts or like a vagrant file or what. I have no idea, especially when it comes to defining service boundaries and stuff. But if anybody has ideas on how we can actually make the bar for defining a use case a little bit more structured, and I don't think there's anything off the table there, but any idea to constrain the way that we describe these would, I think, be really cool if we could come up with one.
I actually think, Jay, we're talking here in this group about multiple kinds of things. One of the kind of things is what we've been focusing on, which is really kind of a high-level use case, but we're also very concerned with the actual expression in the API. People do want it less confusing, less tricky, less ugly.
Yeah.
I think that's valid. I think our API is sharp-edged, just in the way it's expressed. So I think it's legitimate to talk about both of those as interesting and important kinds of things.
Well, the latter is definitely something you can be very concrete about, because you can say, propose, propose a better way of describing this, and that's something.
Right, but the point is, it's different, right? It's not about high-level function and what we're accomplishing. It's very concretely about how we actually express it in the objects.
Yeah. So how we make things concrete. That's a good point. So we can't just have one way of making things concrete. We might have to have multiple ways of making things concrete, but we should probably have ways of making things concrete, right? And
I agree. Yes.
That's all I'm saying. And if anybody has a way to do that for some funnel of use cases, that would save us a tremendous amount of time, I think. And it would be fun. It would make it more interesting because we could really get straight to the pointed issue faster and avoid bike shedding. But I haven't been able to think about this yet, but I have some ideas. If anybody else has any ideas, let me know. Like nothing's off the table. Activity diagrams, Petri nets, whatever you're into, vagrant files, I don't care. But yeah, okay, cool. So what else? Is there anything else? Because I think, again, we're still all just getting to know each other. There's tons of new people here. So does anybody want to talk about anything else? Because I'm not in a huge rush to jump into the use cases if people have other ideas to share. Okay, so let's see. We got 30 minutes, so let's try to get through a couple of these. I forgot. Okay, so let's go to the blank one, like we mentioned. Now this I don't know why this is blank, because I think this was Sandor suggests. Sandor, are you here today?
It had a color until half an hour ago.
Yeah, like so I think we accidentally somebody. Okay, let's just color it. I don't know. I'm going to assume.
Maybe we should discuss it before we try to put color on it.
I'm gonna assume it was yellow from last time. I don't think anybody agreed on it, but okay. Let's just take a moment to read it. Feel free to chime in, anyone. I'm just going to read it myself. Through a secure gateway, which enforces authentication and
I don't understand this one. So I think we're saying those 4 bullet points there, the 4 policies required, are already expressible in the current API.
Yeah, I think the only thing that would be in addition is enforcing communication through a gateway, which I'm not sure would be in scope of.
Well, actually, if you look at the 4th, that's already implied by the first 3. If the first 3 are done, the 4th is automatic because we have default deny whenever there's something applies. So the only issue is the first 3. And for 2 of them, it's explicitly noticed that that's expressible. The first one, someone said, couldn't we do this with egress? And I said, hey, let's do this with ingress. If you do it with ingress, what that amounts to is someone has some automation that says, whenever a new namespace is created, something automatically tosses in a network policy that says, allow ingress from every pod to every pod in this namespace. And that would get you, the first part, and then someone can write the spec that says, oh, also allow, the communication to and from the security gateway.
I believe that's what OpenShift does, right? Like, just, I mean, I think, I think that's what they do. I'm not sure, but.
Wait, so how is this different from the cluster scope network policy use case?
Yeah, that's where I was going. I mean, I think my interpretation of this use case is that the tenant separation is kind of like the namespace boundaries. Now, with the network policies, you are able to use namespace selectors and allow ingress egress, but you need like a cluster admin to be able to sort of allow or disallow this kind of communication between the tenants, which is like in this case probably could be a namespace scope. So that's my interpretation. So maybe this also kind of falls into the cluster level scope policies, which can be, with the new APIs, can be used to define this kind of access.
This is cluster scope for sure. I mean, it's definitely, that's the whole point.
So what you were saying about OpenShift, in old OpenShift, we had this multi-tenant model that like pre-network policy. But when using network policy, there is something, we have something called the default project template that for user created namespaces, you can cause any number of objects to be automatically created with them. So it is possible to have a default set of network policies be created with every new user namespace. And it seems like something like this, like just having that, like the ability to, have template network policies that automatically get created would solve a lot of this and would also solve other use cases.
Is that something that y'all have ever discussed upstreaming or anything that, I guess that, I don't know if there's a.
Yeah, I don't know because I'm mostly only involved with networking related features and that's actually, completely not networking related. It just, happens that you can use it for network policies just like any other object. So, but then I assume they probably did talk with upstream at some point and people didn't want it. I don't know.
Yeah, I never heard about it. It sounds good to me. I'd like to see it upstream.
But with the project templates and having these policies created as part of the template, you can still override those templates by creating network policies. So I think the ask here is probably that you don't want such kind of overrides.
No, you don't have to worry about that. Again, if you're focused on ingress, right? So if you say that an admin in a namespace, so an admin of a project, he has authority over creating objects in a namespace. So he can allow ingress. I guess the first thing, let's see, I guess, okay, yeah, you want to take away his ability to allow ingress from other namespaces is your concern. Other than that, you're there, because he can only allow, he can't, let's see. Right, yes, if you focus on control through ingress, as long as your administrator for a namespace doesn't foul you up by allowing ingress from someone other than the security gateway or the namespace, you're good. And now what you're really saying is, this is a new gloss on what, or add to what I was talking about earlier. I think Gopin, you are concerned about the case of a administrator for a namespace allowing ingress from other namespaces?
I have not heard the same side on the ingress, but I would imagine that there is some sort of an administrator requirement that says, okay, you can only have ingress from my non-PII namespace, for example. Like if you're doing multi-tenant clusters and you only want to allow ingress from, if you're doing sort of tiered installations, where you have zones of security, say, for example, on the same cluster, then you would want to say that, okay, ingress is only allowed between, zone 4 namespaces, for example, or zone 4 security workloads, things like that.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're pretty much there, but we want some more control over what ingress can be added.
Sandor didn't, Sandor is not here today to clarify whether we've accurately satisfied at least, I think if he was here, he'd be happy to know that we've made some progress on this.
Mike, for that last point, I guess the assumption is that whoever is deploying apps in that namespace wants to allow fine-grained ingress within that namespace, but we want to prevent them from allowing ingress that isn't from that namespace.
Well, the way this item is written actually prevents the namespace administrator from doing fine-grained access control within the namespace, but I think that's an overreach. I think we want to allow that. I think the real concern here is the cluster admin, again, wants to prevent this namespace admin from allowing too much ingress from other namespaces.
Yeah, I see.
Part of the thing, this mentions specifically an actual physical service. So I don't know whether we're talking about a different use case than what's originally defined here or not.
My interpretation was that the service gateway was just an example of why this policy topology would be useful, but
okay, so we're going off the assumption that the 4 bullets there are sufficient to satisfy his use case.
Yeah, the only thing a service gateway would be needed for is the authentication authorization, right? It's got to do some type of L7 on operation there.
Well, again, I think this thing needs to be clarified by roles. What is it that the app deployer or developer gets to say? What is it the cluster admin gets to say? Because I think the real point here is that he wants a cluster admin to be able to forbid some stuff, even though a namespace administrator tries to get it.
And to me, that seems. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to also say, I think it's written here, but I think it's spurious that he's also saying, let's forbid the namespace administrator from imposing any finer grained control within his namespace. I think we should allow that.
So maybe we need to wait and hear back from Sandor on this.
Yeah, I agree.
I think so.
Let's add a comment for an action item for him and then move on.
I added one to the disallow cross namespace communication thing there, requesting clarification.
I think just it's better to put in the comment, Jay, and mark him.
Okay.
So he got
looks like Dan did that, so we can just.
Sam got it. Okay. See comments.
Yeah, I mean, what's written there already calls out it's the cluster admin that wants this, right? I'm just highlighting it. So it's really, this one is, again, is about something the admin wants, not what's the app deployer wants.
Do we mark this as red or?
Yeah.
I think it's red. The more red we can get, the easier we can move forward. So I'm all for red, making things red now. Okay. So,
yeah, but the less you get people interested in doing this.
I know, it's like really hard. It's really complicated. But yeah, red doesn't mean we can't do it though. Red just means we need someone to own it a little more. So, okay.
Yeah. Oh, so hold on a second before we move on. Sorry, I'm just kind of like still getting caught up on this stuff. But so the previous proposal basically was not just proposing a key use case, but it was partly proposing a completely new service, that security gateway thing, right?
No, I think the
security gateway was just an example.
Right, the security gateway is something the cluster admin brings to the party. The ask here is that we enable the cluster admin to force things through the stuff he brings to the party.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it's
and
more of that request, more of that request allow kind of thing.
Yeah, but to clarify, we're not saying
Right.
by force, we're not saying that we're actually routing network traffic to the gateway. We're only allowing traffic through the gateway. Like, we're denying everything else so that an application is forced to use it to do whatever it needs to do.
Right. We're not injecting any NAT or anything to modify the routes. We just want to say that the requested routes go through what the cluster admin wants.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, it's more a matter of control than anything else. Okay. We have 15 minutes left. I'm going to see if there's anything blank. And I feel like things are starting to settle in now, where I think we can start to get a little more structured again, like per Cody's comment. But I don't see any other blank ones. And so I think what we need to do is assume that the red ones, unless somebody wants to bring one up specifically, we're not going to spend extra time on them. And we're going to really focus on the green ones, I think.
You mean unless and until someone has adds some more clarity or proposal for them.
Exactly, yeah. Because the red ones are, as is, sort of by default lower priority since we just don't know what to do with them.
That one right there is labeled orange. Is that meant to be red?
I think
it's yellow, but the comment height I think makes it orange.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah. Oh, so the comment. Oh gosh. Okay. So we'll just assume orange is yellow. Also, there's a lot going on here. So,
orange is the new yellow.
Yeah.
Not confusing at all.
Orange equals yellow. Oh my God, I'm not going to write anything. Okay, so here we go. None. Okay, just to clarify. Okay, cool. So we can go to the yellow ones, right? And I think what we should do is, let's just quickly tally how many yellow ones we've got. Now, why are these green? Oh, because of the comment. Okay. Oh, these color codes are really bad. So I need to fix these color codes. So basically anything that's not that perfect, beautiful green like this is yellow. I think, does anybody care if I move the red ones to the bottom?
Actually, Jay, I think it actually might be worthwhile to, and this is going to be a pain, but it might be worthwhile to actually go through all the use cases again and agree on the colors.
Yeah. Okay.
I think some of the colors were set before this group kicked off, and I don't think we got input from the broader group on what they should be.
Okay.
But I also think that a lot of these are duplicated. Like the admin policies comes up multiple times, just worded differently, and I wonder if
that's right.
We want to just collapse all of that into like a single one and then go from there.
Yeah, and the colors don't have any intrinsic value, really. I mean, they were just the initial way we were triaging things. I assume there'd be another level of triage that's more official that we're going to do next. So maybe we should move past colors and actually say, what are we really trying to do here? Like, should we go through them? Is colors the right? I'm happy to go through all the use cases again. Do we want to rate them by color, or is there some more semantically valuable way of categorizing these things that's maybe a little more objective? Like, should we be tagging them? Should we be, because there's metadata associated with these that's lost in the one dimension categorization.
What I would prefer to do actually is do like comment-based voting. So like, you know, people just +1 on in the comments, and we can, you know, whichever user stories have the most +1s, we can maybe talk about those in more detail. But I think we need to consolidate some of the user stories first before we go there.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them are.
Yeah. In other words, again, I think we need to be moving to synthesis. I mean, I think, you know, once we've taken kind of a rough, everybody's looked at these user stories and got a rough idea of what they're about. Not just rough, a fairly good idea of what they're about. I think the next thing we need to do is some more synthesis and organization, because we're not going to address, you know, 24 use cases, right? We're going to think about a few big ideas here and what we're going to do about them.
Yeah. I don't know how we synthesize these. Going through them is an option, Andrew. Do other people feel like we should go through them all from the beginning?
We need to make a first pass, right? Make a first pass through them with everybody on the call.
Okay.
And then once we have at least a general consensus, maybe some +1 votes, then we can decide, you know, how to combine them and, you know, do the initial synthesis on them.
Okay.
This will get everybody familiar with the current landscape.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I was saying we're not going to do that in 10 minutes.
No, not today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much of that familiarization needs to be done on this call? Like, do we think that there's enough description in each of these that folks can review them all on their own, and then we can?
Yeah, I think that would be a good way to do it. We're going to get sidetracked on a lot of other things on this call. It'd be, I think, best just to have everybody read them and comment and +1s.
Yeah, I think each call we get through 2. So we would be doing that for like 12 weeks, which is why I'm a little hesitant to do that all on this call. How about this? How about for folks that want to do this together, we set another time up this week. If nobody shows up later this week at that time, then we do it all independently. That way, if folks want to talk through it, they can do it, but it's not part of this official meeting. And I'll just throw a timeout, say Wednesday at the same time that we're doing now. So I'll go through these myself during that time.
Actually, I think what would be more useful, Jay, is if you go through them and you reach out to whoever authored the use case and make sure the user stories there is super clear, and that there's no like confusion, and then also get rid of any duplicates because some of them are duplicated. And then I think at that point we might be good to just have people review it asynchronously and do comment-based voting.
Yeah, I mean, do we want to keep this format? I feel like this is a very bloated format for the amount of information we have. I feel like text would be better. But the comments here are nice. I don't know. You want to do I guess comment-based voting you need Google Docs for, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let me just I can try to go through these and I can try to clean these up a little bit. And then I will, what should we do next time? It's 4:50 now, so this call's pretty much done. What should our agenda be for the next call? I don't suspect that if I go through these, people are going to get a lot of time to.
You know, I like Ricardo's suggestion. You know, GitHub is great for reviewing and commenting. You know, maybe we should shift this kind of conversation to GitHub.
I would vote for that. I feel like this is bloated, but I don't want to disrupt the ecosystem unless there's a unanimous decision that we should do that. I think we could cram more information into a smaller amount of space on GitHub as well.
Yeah, I'm a +1 for GitHub.
Does anybody have a strong objection?
How are we proposing that we use GitHub for this? There are a few ways I can imagine that we would.
Issues? I think issues with thumbs ups and thumbs downs. And just make our own little repo for it.
In Kubernetes enhancements.
We can ask an alternative repository as Service API is doing, maybe like inside Kubernetes 6.
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with one that's just a personal one and transfer it. I think it's probably the best thing to do, right? Unless it's really easy to get those quickly. But assuming that that's doable, assuming we can, within the 20 of us, figure out a way to make a GitHub repository, the question is, do we all agree that it would be a good way to do it?
I don't know that the selection of tool necessarily solves our problem here. I think that, you know, maybe one way to look at it is we just create a new doc with the synthesized use cases and give each use case author a chance to go through and work on their stuff there, and then we could reference back. This one is, you know, has a lot of comments and a lot of stuff in it. We just need to pull all this into one doc that maybe is a fresh look at where things are combined without having to go through the whole effort of switching the tooling machinery, right? I don't want to slow us down shifting everybody to GitHub yet if we're still collaborating on a single doc.
Yeah, I agree. I think we just need it. Someone needs to go through all of these and just prune it and clean it
exactly.
up.
Just create a second, you know, a version 2 doc of the, you know, this is version 2 network policy, but a second draft doc, right? Where we pull all the synthesized.
I'm going to take them. Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to look at these and I'm just going to dive into these and start cleaning them up. I think that's the best we can do right now. I don't think it's worth debating GitHub or not unless we all agree one way or other. So let's keep the doc the way it is. And let me spend some time on this, cleaning it up, making it better, right? And I'll try not to impose any opinions on it and just actually do my best to clarify these and actually spend some time on it, because I actually haven't been able to spend any focused time on cleaning these up.
Don't be afraid to collapse stuff, though. We've got the history on this doc. You know, collapse it down. If somebody doesn't agree, we can bring that up. The idea is to simplify this so people can ingest it. Right now, it's not very ingestible.
Yeah, and we have that spread, but that didn't really solve. Yeah, it just needs love. It needs work. So we got to work on it. So I'm going to work on this. If anybody wants to work on this with me, let me know. But if not, I'm just going to own working on this and making it as ingestible as possible. And yeah, I may have to take some creative license to change things around, because otherwise we'll never get anywhere.
Yeah, +1 to Cody's comment, like just resolve, if you want, just like resolve all the comments, and like if people really wanted that comment to stay, like just have them post it again.
Okay. All right, so that's the PSA. I'm going to work on this. Again, anybody who wants to help me, let me know. I'm happy to do any or all of this in Zoom with anyone, but I'm going to do it either way this week, okay? PSA, to brew things. Ping on Slack. Okay, in capital letters. So I'm not, if I kill your use case, I'm apologizing in advance. It's not on purpose. So, all right, cool. Thanks everybody for staying involved. I know this is tricky with the fact that we're small and now we're big and we're kind of redoing some stuff that we had done before, but it's gonna get, we're gonna get where we want to be in a few weeks in terms of getting our rhythm back. So, and Cody's going to help me. That's so sweet of you, Cody. Cody, yeah. So reach out on Slack and we'll hang out and do this. I don't want to do it all by myself. And anybody else. And then that's good enough. Oh, there's a lot of comments here. Oh, here's Ricardo. Okay. I think we can end this. It's 4:59. You all get one minute back. Thanks everybody for coming, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
See everybody.
See you folks. Bye-bye.